Hello, everyone. Today in the podcast, we have Barbara Rachko, who was born in 1953 in Paterson, New Jersey, and currently resides in New York City. She is a contemporary painter specializing in large pastel on sandpaper paintings that depict Bolivian Carnival masks. Rachko has dedicated 38 years to revolutionizing pastel as a fine art medium, emphasizing its merits through her artworks and her influential blog. She is also the subject of the acclaimed documentary Barbara Rachko, The True Grit, which is a pretty amazing film. It's a short documentary film available on YouTube as well, and recently was screened on in the month of July in on 26th of July in New York. So, Barbara, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you very much for inviting me to do the podcast today, Siddhan.
It is so lovely to have you on board with us. And first of all, I want to thank you to find time and to discuss the journey of yours. So, to begin with, I wanted to understand that how you decided and when did you decide to become an artist?
It's a pretty long story. My life has taken so many twists and turns, and I'm not sure where to start. Well, maybe I'll start when I was a kid. Um, when I was when I was about 6 years old, I started taking painting classes at a an artist studio in New Jersey where I was growing up. And I studied oil painting. They were basically art classes for kids. You know, it was a group of kids, maybe, I think there were 15 or 20 of us every Saturday morning from like 10 to noon. We would go and learn art, like how to make art. And I did that for about 8 years or so. And I really loved painting. I seemed like I had some aptitude, for it. And the only problem with it was I was growing up in a blue collar family, and my father in particular thought of art as a hobby. He didn't see any future as a profession. So when I turned 14, all of a sudden he said, "That's it. I'm not paying for your lessons anymore. You can't go on Saturday mornings anymore." So, I was pretty disappointed, and I guess I sort of internalized the message that, oh, art's something you don't do for money. You do it for fun and can't make a living at it. And there were no artists in my family. I didn't have any role models of any kind, no writers, no dancers, no actors, no artists whatsoever. So I guess I kind of put painting and art kind of on the back burner. And so I went along, I was in high school, and I graduated high school. I decided to study psychology in college. I went to the University of Vermont for 4 years, got my psychology degree, and after college, there wasn't really much you could do with a bachelor's in psychology. That was true back in 1975 when I graduated, and it's probably even more so true now. But I ended up going back, living with my parents again in New Jersey, and I wasn't particularly happy. But I ended up at one point. Well, I had a bunch of different jobs. I managed the movie theater for a while. I worked in an A&P as a cashier at a supermarket. I got my real estate license, and I worked as a real estate salesperson for a while. And the real estate job, it actually gave me a lot of downtime. It wasn't particularly busy, I guess, at the time. And what happened was one of my clients, one of the people I was showing houses to, was a pilot, and he one day invited me to go for a ride in his small single engine airplane. And I had never, at that point, I had never been in a small plane. I'm not even sure I had even flown anywhere on an airliner, but certainly I had not been on a small plane. I went for a ride. I think we went up for an hour, flew over New Jersey, and I just fell in love with flying. I remember just saying to myself, "Oh my God, I love this. I have to learn how to do this." And I didn't have any money. Luckily, I was living it with my parents, so I didn't have living expenses. But I decided I was going to learn how to fly. So I went to the local airport, to the local flight school, and I asked the owner. The owner was a woman, which I thought, this is great. I love the fact that a woman was running the school. I would work not for money, but I worked 3 hours and then I would get a flying lesson. The plane was about $25 an hour, and then I would get a free flying lesson. And I found a flying instructor, and that just paid for the airplane. I had to find a flying instructor, which I did right away. An older gentleman who I think had actually flown during World War II. He was an engineer, and I think he kind of saw how motivated I was. And how old was I? I guess I was like 22 or so at the time. He saw how motivated I was to learn how to fly. And he said to me, "I'll teach you how to fly for free." So it was great. I basically worked 3 hours and I got a free flying lesson. So I did that, and I turned out to be a really good student. Over 2 years, I got my private pilot's license, then my instrument rating, my multi-engine rating, my commercial pilot's license, and then at that point, by then I had decided I wanted to be an airline pilot, and the only way to get Boeing 727 flight training, which that was the plane that was being flown by airlines in those days. The only way to do that was to go to Atlanta, and there was I forgot how many months course, but I went to Atlanta to get my Boeing 727 flight engineer certificate. And I remember that class, I was the only woman in the class. It was 30 people, 29 men and me. I was the only woman. After that, I was qualified to be a Boeing 727 flight engineer. And I gave myself a couple of years to find a job with the airlines. At the time, it was a really rough time in the United States then. Reagan was the president. He had laid off all the air traffic controllers, and none of the airlines were hiring new pilots. So basically, I looked for 2 years. I didn't find a job, decided to go in the Navy. And because the Navy had said that they would let me fly if I joined. Basically, I was recruited as a pilot. The recruiter lied to me because once I got in the Navy, they didn't let me fly. At the time, women, this was in 1983, women were not women were not allowed in combat in the United States. So their role as pilots was really limited. The only pilots in the Navy that were women in the Navy were training men on single engine airplanes. So I really didn't want to do that anyway. But anyway, I joined the Navy and I was miserable. I was working paperwork jobs. I worked in Pensacola, Florida for 3 years, just like basically was a glorified secretary, and I really hated it. I kept saying, I'm qualified to fly Boeing 727s. What am I doing here filing and, sitting in an office and doing this, really awful work, So anyway, so from Pensacola, I went to Washington, D.C., and I got orders to work at the Pentagon because I said to myself, well, if the Navy's not going to let me fly, I have to at least be in a city that has some culture and has museums and has theater and has some interesting cultural things to do. Pensacola is near Alabama, and there's not much culture there. So I went to Washington next and worked at the Pentagon. And once I got to Washington, I decided to, I was really miserable, actually. I was even more miserable working at the Pentagon in Washington. I was working the midnight shift, basically from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. And I was so unhappy. I hated my job. I was totally out of sync with the rest of humanity. I was sleeping during the day when everybody else was up and working and doing things. And I was working at night, when everybody else was asleep, so I was pretty miserable. And after about a month, I guess I said, I have to make a big change. I'm like so unhappy. And as I say in my film, I used to get out of work, get in my car, and I would cry because I felt so trapped. You don't resign, you don't quit the Navy. You sign up, you make a commitment for so many years. So I couldn't leave. So I remembered at that time, I remembered the painting classes, that I had taken when I was a kid, and how happy I was. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm gonna start drawing again and see, if that makes me happy, And so I started taking classes. So I was working from 11 to 7, overnight.
Yeah.
And then sometime during the day, I would, I signed up for like a 2-hour drawing class. And I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is what I meant to do with my life. I just loved it. And over time, I ended up, taking, I guess the next semester I was taking 2 classes, then I was the next semester 3. I became, and eventually 5 classes a week, either mostly drawing. I kind of also devised the curriculum for myself where I said I was only going to study black and white media and drawing for two
Yeah.
years. So I worked with charcoal, graphite, and that's it, and basically refined my drawing. I wasn't that good at drawing when I started, but at the end of 2 years, I was really good, if I do say so.
Yeah.
And so I decided, 2 years black and white, and then I would go to color. So then I started doing watercolors, which I didn't really take to watercolors. I realized I'm very meticulous, and I like to refine what I'm working on. I can't just put it down quickly like you have to do with watercolor brushes. So I said, well, that's not for me. And then I started studying pastel with a teacher, and that I really, really liked. And my 2 years of drawing and then moving to pastel, it was a natural fit for me. And I just basically fell in love with pastel, and so this was like in the late 1980s. And so by then, I guess like around about 1988 or so, I said to myself, well, I think I found my calling in life. I want to be a professional artist. That's what I want to do the rest of my life. The heck with the Navy. I'm done with the Navy. I definitely want to be an artist, but it was pretty scary. You don't go from a very stable
Yeah.
paycheck and all these benefits, to nothing, as an artist.
But if you
So
see your experience as a Navy, for example, no matter what the purpose is, I have seen that the artists are not willing to fall into a structure. Is that the case that keeps us away from the normal routine jobs, or is it the purpose is not aligned with our own visions? What is the core reason that you had to explore and nothing big was quenching your thirst?
yes, mostly I was so bored.
Yeah.
I was bored. I just said, this is like, it was a job I could do in my sleep. I need challenges.
Exactly.
I am so curious about so many different things. I want to learn. I have to constantly be learning new things. And in the Navy, I wasn't doing that. It was so, I don't know. I just felt like I hate to say this, but any moron could be in the Navy and do that job that I was doing. So I need challenges in my life, and I love new experiences, and I am kind of a risk taker too, and none of that was being satisfied in the Navy. The Navy was like basically, if you could breathe, you collect a paycheck.
Yeah, we want more challenges and a high risk environment to thrive.
Yes, yes,
And not
and
many people are up for it, but this is especially seen in the terms of artists. Like in the field of art, you will find that people become artists, and 50% of the reason is more of a high risk taking ability.
yes. And it's just so interesting. I mean, every day is different. I'm always learning new things. I One of the things I love about pastel is, even though I've been doing it all these years, I feel like I'm never going to learn all there is to learn about pastel. There just is so much.
Yeah.
There's like, I'm starting to feel like now, like I know what I'm doing after all these years. I'm okay. I know what I'm doing now, but there's so much more to the
Yeah.
blending of colors, and
Yes,
it just endlessly interesting.
absolutely.
So
Uh,
that's what I love.
Baba, actually, I will ask a very quintessential question that is asked: are artists made or are they born? Because you explain everything about your family. Nobody is there in your family is actually very
Right,
sweet.
right.
Which side of the debate do you fall on? Right? Because we generally see people say that there's some natural born thing, and
Yes,
you kind of discovered this when you were very young, and somehow life made twists and turns, and you ended up doing what one can say you were natural at, in a sense.
yes.
So which side of debate would you fall on?
I think first you have to be like born, that's your inclination. But at the time, when I first started out, I had no skills whatsoever. Even when I look back at um, I don't have any of them left, but I have a picture in my head of the paintings I made when I was a kid. I don't think they showed any particular promise. Like, I don't think if you looked at those paintings, you would say, this person is born to be an artist. I don't think you would say that. But so I think it's probably a combination, because there are skills you have to learn, but you have to, I guess, I don't know what to call it, the talent or the interest or the inclination to want to do it. And then in my case, it's like, you move hell and high water, come up May, you do it, and you get really good at it because you're so passionate about it and you love it so much, and it's just so fascinating. But I guess you have to start out with a certain um, I don't know, personality mix or whatever it is. Because of course, not everybody becomes an artist. But so you have to have something there, some kind of a germ, that grows from there.
Uh, Barbara, one of the things that you were talking about pastel, so it came to my mind was that a lot of the work that we're doing are singular portraits of these archetypal characters. But what is
Yes.
the narrative behind the group representation that seem to come alive in the night? Please
My
continue.
work, my pieces just have always come out that way. They come, I think it's probably a function of the months that I put into each painting, that I work from photographs, and if you put the photograph next to the painting, they're very different. And, the photograph you would think would look more alive than the painting. But no, the painting looks like it's ready to just jump off the paper. Those characters look like they're going to just run out into the room. There's so much more energy and alive in the paintings, more so than the photos. And um, I don't know. I don't like purposely do that, but that's how they come out. You know, that's always been the case with me. Um,
Since you're
even if
spending,
I
yeah,
yeah
please.
yeah
Yeah. You are spending 2 to 3 months on an average on one painting. And
yes
this is coupled with the fact that you are highly disciplined
yes
as an artist. So, how do you, since it's a very uncertain kind of job, and usually people think that artists do not have a routine or artists do not have a process to make it, and it's very abstract. The process itself is very abstract. So, what is your perception about it, and why do you follow a discipline? I see a lot of artists that do not have any discipline in place. And
right
does it
right.
make an impact in the work also?
Well, the discipline part for me, I ended up my Navy career ended up being 7 years on active duty, 14 years in the reserves. I'm a retired Navy commander. Also, that's not mentioned in the film, but I'm a retired Navy commander. So I used to feel like all the, and so 21 years I spent altogether. So I used to feel like, wow, I wasted so much time. Like I wasted all those 21 years. Well, 7 of them active duty, meaning I worked full time in the Navy. The 14 years I was working full time as an artist, part time for the Navy. So, but I felt for the longest time, those 7 years, oh my God, I wasted 7 years of my life. I could have been an artist and been 7 years further along, you know. But then I've gradually realized, look at what the Navy gave me. I'm, you know, I work 5 days a week. I have a regular schedule, and I thought all artists do that. You know, I was so surprised. The more I would look around at my fellow artists, and they didn't do that. You know, and I thought,
Yeah.
wow, how could you not do that? If you love your work, why wouldn't you do that? Like, why wouldn't you keep a regular schedule? But they're like, oh, I don't, you know, I don't feel like working today. I went and did this or that. I'm like, how could you do that? You know, like, this is your vocation, you know, this is the great love of your life. How could you not put the time in, you know? So I suppose the Navy gave me that, but I'd like to think even if I didn't go in the Navy, I would be doing the same. You know, I would still put in long hours because again, because of my work takes so long. You know, I do 3 or 4 pieces in a year, and if I don't put in those hours, oh my God, you know, what am I going to make one in a year? You know,
Yeah.
I feel bad that I don't make more pieces in a year, but I know those 4 pieces are really good. They're really coming from my core. They're coming from deep inside of me, and each one is the best possible painting that I could make. You know, I know that about my work. So,
Since you have been following a discipline, like what does your daily routine look like when you are in your studio? And when do you start your day and when do you end your day? Or is it also dependent on like how much work is left to complete a painting? Or is it dependent on any kind of deadline that you keep? What is your planning mode?
I don't usually have deadlines other than my own, where I like to at least complete one painting every 3 months. I'm a little overdue right now, actually, on one, um, but I like to every 3 months have something finished. My day, I also am a swimmer. I usually swim or else go to the gym first thing in the morning. I do that like 6 days a week. I give myself one day off, but the rest of the days I go exercise first thing. And then I get to my studio, and the length of my day kind of depends on the time of year. In this, because I need daylight. So in the summer, I can work longer hours because it just, you know, the days are longer. And in the winter here in New York, it's dark by 4 o'clock. So in the winter, I'm like wrapping up kind of early, you know, and I find myself working like 2 hours at a time, and just it just works out that way. I don't look at a clock or anything, but I find myself, I'll work for 2 hours and then I'll think I'll either break for lunch or, just take a little break and read a little bit or whatever, and then get back to it and do another 2 hours or so, and then, take a couple breaks here and there. But it's a pretty steady routine, I suppose. And I think to get anything done,
Yeah.
I think artists have to be disciplined, otherwise, how do you,
Yeah.
how do you make it? How do you create anything?
Basically what I'm seeing is a very very different person as an artist here, because as a typical archetype of a passionate artist or an entrepreneur is like almost like this mad person who's always there, a mad scientist in his library, a mad person who's pursuing some entrepreneurship job, he's always at work. And a
Right,
painter or an artist, they are basically there doing their work, they don't know the time. But here
right.
your work is almost like a craftsman. Like I can say that a very very good professional at anything. For example, even if I look at the professional carpenters or anyone who just basically job in that particular point of time, that they are the best in the world, but that's how it's coming out to be. So how have you basically is it innate to you, that, or maybe it's because of your work in navy, which was actually very much disciplined in time, so that discipline is continuing and you are approaching your work as a craftsman rather than a pure passion
Yes.
driven out thing. so
Oh,
so how
craft.
is it?
Yes, craft is extremely important to me. I think I think if you have an idea as an artist and there's no craft behind it, you don't have anything. I continually try to get better at my craft. I think I have a very high level of skill at this point in time. I could pretty much render anything in pastel now, after 38 years or so. And craft for me has always been extremely important. And it's so my previous work, I had to be there. I had to be there those hours, right? Now I love being at my easel working and trying to figure out um, some technical issue that I'm having. It's like how can I make this hair on this figure feel like real hair? Like I love the technical challenges, and I love being at my easel and actually making the work. I get so much joy from from you know making the work and solving problems. I don't know. It's a joyful process for me. I don't know. I'm probably smiling most of the day. I don't know, but I love making art. You don't have to, nobody has to crack a whip or anything to get me to go to my studio. I love walking into my studio. I have thousands of colors. I love color, and I don't know. It's my favorite place. I love being there. I love working. So I guess it's all about love, really. So,
When you visited La Paz, Bolivia, you felt like you were called there, as according to the short documentary film that we have, The True Grid. Uh, how did these figure started speaking to you?
yeah, what happened was, so I was on a tour, and towards the end of the tour, we went to a museum in La Paz, Bolivia. It was the Museum of Ethnography and Folklore in La Paz. And basically, it was a museum that exhibit all the different arts that are made in Bolivia. And one of the rooms was masks, very very powerful carnival masks that were made by a particular mask maker. I think they were from the 1960s. I believe the mask maker had died and had passed the molds that he used to make these masks to his nephew. And this museum was exhibiting an entire set of all of his masks, and they were really stunning when I saw them. They were hanging on black walls. The lighting was spectacular. It was like theatrical lighting, a spotlight on each of the masks. And I don't know, I think I just walked in and my mouth probably dropped open and I probably said, wow, I can't believe this room. And what resonated for me was before that, I was working on a series of pastel paintings called black paintings. And I had black backgrounds in those paintings. And I was working with mostly Guatemalan and Mexican carved wooden figures that I would set up on a black cloth, photograph, and then make a painting, based on those photographs that I was taking mostly in my apartment. So anyway, I walked into this exhibition. It looked like the mass to me looked like three-dimensional versions of my paintings. So my which I thought, wow, this is fascinating. So my paintings at the time, my black paintings, I was making 2D paintings, right? On, pastel on sandpaper based on photographs, which are photographs of 3D objects. So I thought this is kind of interesting. So my black paintings were like taking 3D objects, making them into 2D, a 2D art form, right? Then I saw the masks. I said, oh my God, these masks are 3D versions of my 2D paintings. So I just thought that was really intriguing. So, and I don't know, I just knew, it just was like a light bulb went off in my head. I just knew this is going to be my next work. My next series is going to be based on these Bolivian masks. They were just so strong. I think I spent probably an hour or so taking photographs. And the rest of the people on my tour, I said, you know what, you go see the rest of the museum. I'll catch up, but I'm going to spend time here and with these masks. I just had to take as many photos as I could. And that's what I did. And then this was in 2017. I think we were there in May or June of 2017. And I got back to New York, and these photos I took, I was taking them on my iPad. I have an iPad Pro that I travel with. I had never actually printed any of the photographs before that I took on my iPad. So I even as I was taking those photographs, I said, oh my God, I hope when I get back to New York, I can print these in a large enough photo that I can get enough detail to see what I need to see to make paintings. So I got back to New York. I went to my favorite photo lab, and I got my first 20 by 24 inch photo printed, and it was pretty detailed. I said, wow, I said, this is fantastic. So then I had all these photographs, and I started the series. And the painting you pulled up, that was the very first one in the series, the very first one I ever did. Because when I got back and looked at all my photos, that was my very favorite photo of that mask in particular was my favorite. So that's the first one I started with. And another revelation on that series, to be practical, So in my previous work, I've always collected folk art from different countries, from Mexico, Guatemala, Peru, sometimes, different countries. And I would buy them, I'd find them in little tiny shops, and I would buy them, either bring them back with me or ship them back to New York. So when I saw these masks, another thing that occurred to me was, wow, I don't have to buy them. I don't have to buy them. I don't have to get them back to New York, figure out where the heck am I going to put them, because I don't have a lot of space here anymore. It was like my my creative process kind of went express. I was not having to do the middle portion of getting the figures, getting them back to New York to my apartment,
Mhm.
putting them on a black cloth, photographing them. I was able to take the photographs in La Paz. So a whole bunch of my creative steps were cut out, and I kind of liked that. It was like streamlined, my whole creative
Yeah.
process. So that was pretty cool too.
You keep the titles you give to your unique characters, and it gives an impression that you consider them like a guide, like a teacher.
Yes, yes.
And does this progress happens after the painting is made, or during the process itself, you are thinking about the title and you are thinking about them as guiding you?
Yeah, the painting suggests a title along the way. As I'm making a painting, a title will occur to me. And then for the rest of the painting, I'm thinking about the title. For the rest of the painting, I have to make the title fit. I have to make sure the finished painting fits, the title fits the finished painting. So that's kind of an interesting process for me too. Sometimes, like I have a piece I'm working on now. You won't have a slide, you won't have an image of it, but called Apparition. And that title came to me pretty early. And then, now I'm putting finishing touches on it. And I'm just trying to make sure that the painting matches the title. And I think it does, at this point, um, but usually the titles come to me somewhere along the way. And sometimes they come from books that I'm reading. I'm usually listening to music in my studio. Sometimes they come from song lyrics. Sometimes they come from movies I've seen. Titles come from, all over the place. You never know. I mean, I could be far away from my studio, and all of a sudden a title will come to me, and I'll hear a word and I'll think, oh yeah, I think my painting that's
Yeah.
on my easel now, that might be a good title. And then I'll go back to the studio. I'll think of the title and look at the painting and think, yeah, I think there's a match there. Titles are pretty interesting the way they come.
So basically, it is working like a to and fro conversation happening with the painting.
Yes, that's for sure. Yes. Because sometimes I
And
change too. Yeah. Sometimes I'll get a title early on and then it doesn't work and I'll come up with something which I think is better.
your viewers recognize the Jungian archetypes in your work, unease coupled with familiarity. When you choose a new theme, do you set out to question the norms of art and beauty, or are you questioning the indifference and censorship the viewer casts upon themselves?
Um, I don't know that I'm thinking about either of those things really. I'm really reacting to the painting in front of me. I think I don't know, that's a tricky one. Maybe on a deeper level, but I'm usually, when I'm at my easel, I'm putting down colors. I'm backing up. I'm looking to see how what I just did, works with the rest of the painting. It either works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, I go back and I change it. But I'm really just trying to make a really strong painting. I'm trying to make a painting I've never seen before. I'm trying to make something that's certainly not boring. Coming from my previous job, like one of the one of my mantras is, I forgot the artist who said this. I will not make any more boring art. I forgot who said that, but that's one of my mantras. I will not make boring art. So
So,
I think
yeah.
I think I'm reacting more to the painting later on after I finish. Then meanings start to come in, I think. And as I get feedback from other people and I hear what they see in my work, but I think I don't know. I don't think I'm unique. I think most artists, when we're in the studio working, we're just trying to make a good piece, something we can be proud of, something we if your name's gonna be on it, I want it to be the best thing I can make.
Mhm.
So I
But
think the other stuff comes later.
is it important for you to get the feedback on the painting, or like how the viewer is engaging with the painting? Is it important for you to that the viewer should fall in sync with the painting the way you have made it, or what your emotional
Oh,
engagement
no,
with it? No?
no, not at all. I feel like I kind of like to be a fly on the wall. Like when I
Yeah.
show at galleries, sometimes I've gone into a gallery show and been anonymous so I could just listen to people's conversation in front of my work. Just because I think the beauty of art is there's no right answer. Everybody brings their own experience to it, and they have all kinds of associations that, from their life experience and their background, stuff that I would never occur to me. But I love that about art. It has so many interpretations, and they're all correct. There's no wrong way to experience an artwork. I love the fact that people just have associations, like just the fact that it touches somebody and it brings a memory or something. I think when art is successful, the more interpretations it has, that means it's been really successful. If people kind of look at it and there's no reaction, then it's like, oh my god, I failed. you know so I think that's the beauty of art. There's so many different ways to look at it.
But in your work, there is a lot of consistency. And it seems by seeing your work, it seems that you have found yourself. And this is something that a new beginner artist is completely missing. Like as if, and we have talked about this in one of the discussions also, that
Yes.
how when people ask that who are they, like when who am I as an artist, or is it like who am I, is the question that they are not ready to answer yet, and they need to explore. So what's the method of exploration? And
Yeah.
is it important to fall into the consistency plan as an artist? Because all the established artists, such as you, have a very consistent uh, bulk of work. As if
Yes.
you pick any of the painting and it will be like a drop in the ocean, which is the same drop like any
Right.
other
Right.
drop. So, uh, this is this in contradiction to the fact that they are now like one of the very common question that new artists asks is that how can I be more creative if I'm gonna make only the same kind of art? And I feel that this is a wrong way of dealing with the question that who am I like as an artist?
Right. Right. Well, I think when you first start out, as did I tried all different kinds of things. I different subject matter. I was working in graphite. I was working in charcoal. I was working in watercolor. I did oil paint as a kid. I did some clay figures as a kid. I think, you start out, you cast a wide net, in any kids, as a kid, you don't know what your interests are. You don't know what your eventual profession's going to be. You try all different things, so many different things. And I think artists, when they first start out, I think you try a lot of different things, but at a certain point, you gradually settle in to I think you cannot help but develop a style, a style that reflects your values, what you think is important. Like at this point, after all this time, I don't think I could not make a painting that does not look like a Rachko. You
Yeah.
could probably hold the gun to my head. I still couldn't do it. I'm going to make a painting, and it's going to look like my style at this point. So I think young artists have to just keep working, just work. As you work, you'll discard some things as not being true to who you are, that is not going to be part of your creative output, you know. I think if you just keep working, eventually you get a style.
But at the same time, this is more like a chicken and egg situation. An artist who is working, let's say, for 4 or 5 years, and then eventually realizes that the bulk of work that he or she has made is not the work that they realize. So there is a sunk cost fallacy at the same time working. Like, let's say there is an artist who has made 300 artworks, which is not him. And then eventually, like, they tend to create an identity around those artworks. And then they try to compel themselves to make eventually this specific kind of artwork, which is not them.
Yeah, I
And
see.
so I have seen a
That's
lot
gonna
of artists going in the wrong direction completely after
Yeah,
some.
those artists are going to be very unhappy, for one thing. They're going to just be making a product, basically, that's not true to who they are as people or as an artist. I don't think, this is a long game,
Yeah.
decades you have to spend at this before you realize, you know, I
Yeah.
guess, I'm 71, I kind of know who I am as an artist. I kind of know who I am as a person. I mean, I'm still learning and changing and developing, but there's
Yeah.
definitely a long learning curve for artists. I don't think I think any artists who come out of art school and all of a sudden they're like the next hot thing and they have all this pressure to
Yeah.
create a particular type, style. I feel really badly for them because, especially if they're like new MFA students, all of a sudden got popular, it's like you have decades ahead of you. Are you really going to, you're not going to be making the same work, decades
Yeah.
from now. You're either going to be really miserable, you're going to and stop making the work, or you're going to, I don't know. I feel bad for those for those, overnight, so-called overnight success kind of people. But it's a
Long
really
game.
long
Yeah.
process to be an artist. And maybe I'm lucky that, nobody really cared for a long time. I think
But
there's benefits to that nobody's really
yeah,
watching what you're doing, so you're free to experiment and come up with your own work. There's no pressure.
you might have also faced some struggle when you started off. And like, what were your struggles as an artist?
um, well, when I first started, like when I left the Navy, my first issue was, how am I going to make any money? you
Yeah.
know Again, mentioning that secure paycheck. And um, I really, only for a year, I made portraits. I did portrait commissions, um, and I only did it for a year because I realized how limiting that was. I said to myself, "Wow, I left the most boring job in the world, and now here I am doing portrait commissions. Talk about boring art.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
did that for a year, and I wasn't happy, and I said that's enough of that. And then I was lucky. I had some income. I also had a boyfriend at the time
Yeah.
who was supporting me, and um, I don't know. I gradually found my way. At one point, I thought maybe I should go to the Maryland Institute for an MFA degree. And I actually went and talked to the dean of the school. And long story short, I decided not to get an MFA. I decided to just work on my own and figure out things on my own. And that's kind of what I've done. I think the fact that my work is so unique, I came up with my own way of mixing colors. I have my own pastel techniques because I really didn't learn. Nobody said you do this, you do that. I just got in there and started working, and came up with my own way. But it's the whole. I mean, the whole thing's a struggle. I mean, so many times I felt like nobody's paying attention. And my family doesn't get what I do. Nobody in my family, is like,
Yeah.
oh, you're making great work. No, nobody. You kind of have to be, uh, I don't know, stubborn.
Thick
You have
skin.
to be stubborn. You have to have conviction.
Yeah.
You can't let what other people say influence you too much. And those things are hard. They really are. And I think
Uh,
I'm better at
yeah.
them now than I was.
When your
But
family was not acknowledging your work, how, like, this is a very common uh, problem that artists face, that
yes,
since it is not acknowledged by their loved ones, it feels like they are going in the wrong direction, or maybe they start questioning themselves. And like, how did you navigate through all of this? I know that it is always tough, and it would have been extremely tough for you as well. But
yes.
you seem to have worked around it, and you seem to have a very strong perception about your artworks. You went ahead and chose a theme, and you went ahead and chose the consistencies to start working on the same level. So, what is your um, navigation process through
Well,
these kind of
what,
challenges?
it was, I have to say, my late husband was my biggest supporter. I met Brian. So I moved to Washington in January of 1986. And a month later, I met Brian, my future husband. And he he was my biggest supporter. Oh my God. He would, he just loved my work, and he came to openings with me. And another reason I was able to leave the Navy was because of Brian. Brian realized,
Yeah.
how much I loved art, and he said, I'll support you, whatever you want to do, so, and he was like, I used to hear from his work friends how he would brag about me, about,
Mm.
I used to do a lot of juried shows in Virginia, and I won first prize very often. And Brian would be, bragging about me, but I had a lot of moral support from Brian. That was a big, big help, and, by then I was, so in the 80s, I was like in my, how old was I?
27,
30s. Yeah,
30, yeah,
30s. Yeah.
30s. Mm.
So, so I was long, had, left my family behind. I was, my family was in New Jersey. I was in Virginia. And I basically, was doing, what I wanted to do and what I was meant to do. And Brian was a big part of it. I miss him so much now. And I look at how, so he was, he's been gone since 2001. And I look at how my career has flourished since then. And I like to think, he would be so proud of me at this point, because I've gone so far beyond where I was, 23 years ago. When he was around, I was doing pretty well then, but I've gone way beyond, where I was. But
How,
he's,
yeah, how did
he
he,
was my biggest supporter. Yeah.
how
So
did it affect you? Like, the 9/11 happened, and he's no more, and like, how did you take this in your
it
work, and like,
was,
what was your,
yeah,
it would have been extremely tough, and but like, usually people are not able to get over that, or I think it's,
yeah,
yeah, like,
yeah.
but you seem to have risen over it. And
It was really hard. It was a devastating thing, a loss, really. Brian was, not only was he supportive, he was my photographer in those days. Um, so I used to work from these my very first series, my domestic threat series, was based on photographs of objects that were set up in the house in Virginia. Brian was my photographer. He was integral to me being able to create art because he shot the reference photos I was using. So besides being moral support, he was like my partner in making art. So when I lost him, it was horrible, and I didn't make any art for nearly a year. I mean, just losing, my best friend, my soulmate, it was just awful. I mean, what I think helped was at that point, he and I, we had two residences. By then I had moved to New York to pursue my art career. Brian worked at the Pentagon and was still living in Virginia. We basically had two residences, one in Alexandria, Virginia, and the one in New York. And what helped me was um, I would come home here. I could come home to an apartment where I wasn't used to having Brian here. I had basically a separate life here. When I was in Virginia, he and I, were a couple, and we had friends. We had people who knew us as a couple. I often think if I was living in Virginia in 2001, I don't know what would have happened. It would have been horrible to come home every night to an empty house where, there was no Brian. So I think part of it was I had already moved to have a separate professional life. So I think that helped me a lot. And I kind of, I don't know, I guess again, I think art saved me because I could go into my studio. I could block out all the news, for a long time after 9/11. I don't know, probably more than a year. You turn on the radio in the morning. I used to count how many seconds is it going to be before I hear the words 9/11, right? Somebody on the radio is going to say 9/11. It would be 10 seconds, right? I turn the radio on, and it was everywhere. You could not escape 9/11. So I had enough dealing with my own tragedy, my own loss. I didn't need the world telling me every day, more about 9/11. So I felt really lucky. I could go into my studio, no TV, no radio. I don't think I even had a phone at the time. I didn't even want a phone in there. And I could shut the door and I could just work. I could just, maybe be in my own little world, but I could just work on my painting, be concerned with, whatever technical issue, I was having in my work, just do my creative thing. I felt like that was a lifesaver. I could just lose myself in my work. And I remember thinking, wow, what do people who are not artists do, with these feelings and, going through such a tragedy? How the heck do you deal with it? And I guess people become alcoholics, and other destructive kind of behaviors, but I was able to channel everything into my art. I was really lucky in many ways, I think.
It's a very tough experience, and when people don't have such kind of skills like an artist has, I think there is a reaction to the situation, and that goes
Yes,
on, and eventually that becomes like a habit, as you told about
yes,
becoming alcoholic. There are many other ways to start reacting, like maybe people get more angry, or art is more of a healing also.
oh, for sure, yes, yeah,
And
it really helped,
it's a
yes,
meditative process. So when you are in your studio, I think everything is out of your zone, and it's like a
yes,
point blank focus.
yes. Well, as I mentioned in my film too, actually, when I used to fly, when I'd be piloting a plane up in the air, the only thing that existed for me was the plane, the instruments. You're totally in the present when you're flying a plane. At least I was, when I'd be flying. And art is very similar. When you're in the studio, nothing else exists. Your world is your painting. The thing that you're trying to bring life to, so to speak. That's your entire world. Everything else is far, far in the background. You're not thinking about any of that. So I found a lot of parallels between flying and making art in that sense.
What I get from you, Barbara, is a person. I can just imagine when you're working, there is some serenity to the way you are approaching what you work on with certain sense of discipline. And of course, you worked for 38 years in one particular art format, mastered it. Do you still feel like there is something to be achieved, or you look forward to something? You feel that you have arrived at some place. Do you still get up and say what next?
I feel good that I've made some really good work, over the years, but I don't feel like I've reached the end at this point. I think as I mentioned at the beginning, pastel is so interesting to work with as a medium, um, that I feel like I'm never going to know all there is to know about it, especially about mixing colors. I pretty much have I mean, I haven't written it down. It's totally in my head, but I have a whole science of how I mix colors together on the paper that I'm working on, and I find it fascinating to see the nuances of new colors that I come up with. And even though I start out with, several, I don't know how many thousands of pastels in my studio, I'm constantly making new colors on the painting, and I mix it right on the painting, not like on a palette like an oil painter. I'm mixing it right on the painting. And so it'll be a new color, and I could probably never recreate it again, and I find that really interesting. So I don't know, I feel like there's a lot more to learn about my medium in particular. And I have to say, I have a really interesting life on account of my art. That's, I think, one of the benefits of being an artist is, you're free to follow, whatever your interests are. And I don't know, I have a really interesting life, if I do say so. I travel. I was in Japan recently, and France, and I don't know, I just have a really great life, and I attribute it to my work. A lot of it is on account of my work.
Okay.
Talking about the medium, from gritty sandpaper to a velvety touch, is this the crux of the transformation from pain and fear to appreciating all of life and finding its beautiful softer side?
Oh, that's an interesting way to think. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but I like that a lot. Yes. Yeah, that's a very good metaphorical way to put it. Yeah. Starting out with, like, you know, um, tragedy and, struggle and difficulty, and ending up with the beauty and the sublime. I love that. I hadn't thought about that
Yeah.
before, but that's great, Siddharth. I love it.
These artworks have a very strong language,
Yes.
and I have seen that your personality is also very strong. So is it that you were inspired when you went to and see when you saw that and you got in awestruck? So is it required to be awestruck for anyone for a particular theme to become a theme for an artist, or is it related to your personality and eventually comes only with practice and there is no other way?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's probably different for each person, I would think, because, there's really no rules in art. So it probably works differently for each artist, but that's kind of how it worked for me. I was wowed by my subject matter in this case in the Bolivianos. And so it kind of worked that way for me, but I wouldn't want to prescribe, other artists. Oh, if you're not like in awe, don't even bother. I wouldn't do that because, for other people, it may be like a gradual building, um, and so I would, I'm just saying in my case that's how it worked, but I wouldn't tell somebody else it has to be like that. I
But
think it's
how
different.
important it is for anyone to, as an artist, to travel? Like, because you were traveling, because you were exploring, apart from the art itself, you were exploring something that gave you the inspiration for this kind of theme.
Yes. Well, I love to travel, and more so as time goes on. It's like I come home and I'm like, why am I home now? It's like I could be, I could be here or there, but I do have to work, so I have to be in my studio. But um, I think travel gives you just new, it like, expands your brain. It gives you new ways of looking at things. And right now I'm studying French and I'm learning so much. I'm horrible. I don't even speak as well as a 2 year old, but it's really giving me a sense of how people think in different languages, and certain words, like for example, the word souvenir in
Yeah.
French means memory, and I
Oh.
love I love that association. I just think, wow, yeah, souvenir. Of course, it's a memory. But
Mhm.
I think travel is just the greatest education anyone can have. Really, way better than reading books and I just think it's an amazing education, and people should travel every chance they get. In my opinion, I just love travel.
One last question we want to ask you is, what impact do you want to have in the society through your artworks?
Um, you know, I used to think I think I used to want more than this, but I'm happy when people look at my work and they get it. They understand it, they appreciate it. I don't think it has to be a lot of people. Here and there, I pick up people who adore my work, and that's enough. I think at this point, I don't have any great hopes of that I'm going to be Picasso or influence of like a major artist, but I'm really happy when people here and there relate to my work. They see things in it, and they just understand and appreciate, and for me that's pretty great.
Well, Barbara, it's been amazing having conversation with you. And frankly, when I talk to you, you come out as such a happy and a joyous person.
Oh, thank
And
you.
yeah,
Yes, I
so I'm
am. And
con-
again, yeah, it's my work. I'm so fortunate. I am happy. This is a great time in my life, and I have work that I love. How many people can say that, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we talked a lot about work. I have one philosophical question that is debated and discussed in many podcasts. It has been there for the longest time. My question is, what's the meaning? What's the meaning of life?
Oh my God. Um, well, I don't know how to answer that one. Um, for me, I want to keep learning. I want to be happy. Experiencing new things. I don't know about an ultimate meaning. I wonder if there really is one. You know, um, I think I think we have to enjoy what we're doing. We're only here for a certain amount of time. We only get this one life, so you better do it right. Whatever you think is, whatever you want out of life. If you don't do that with your life, then you're missing the boat. I don't really know how to answer that one.
Happiness is one thing, but it's like a complete spectrum of everything that we want.
Yes. Well, but you have to decide what's important
Yeah.
to you and go after that, you know.
But
Yes.
as an artist, is it really happiness that is driving you towards it, or is it art itself that is driving you towards it?
It's art. It's accomplishment. I want to feel that I'm using all of my abilities and developing them as far as I can. I'm not a slacker by any means, and I don't know. I think you want to make the most of your time in
Yeah.
whatever capacity. Life is short, so
It is an observation that happiness is overrated. We want many more things apart from happiness. And I think,
yeah.
like, as an artist myself, I am making art not to be happy, but for the art's sake of making art itself. Uh, there's no fuel that is required to make art. It's like a complete present moment, as you said, in a way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we have all different motivations, not
Yeah.
only for being artists, but for everything that we do. We have all different um, ideas about, what we
Yeah.
want to accomplish, and, but I don't know. Art makes me happy, as I said, I really, I love being in my studio working.
Tell our audience that where people can find you, and if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what are the common platforms that they can on social media, or maybe on your website or email, whatever works for you.
Okay. Okay. I'm pretty much all over the internet.
Yeah.
I'm on Facebook. I have two Facebook pages. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I have two websites. I have a blog. You could pretty much just Google me, and whatever comes up, click it. You'll find me. I'm not hard to find.
And your Instagram handle is?
It's Barbara Rachko _artist. And
Uh,
my blog is Barbara Rachko's Colored Dust, where I mostly speak about pastel, travel. I do a series every Wednesday of inspirational quotes for artists. My blog, by the way, you had said 140,000. I now have 145,000. Just to
wow.
make a small correction, it's
That's
growing and it's growing pretty crazily
significantly.
at
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
point. Yeah. So
I would like to request all the people who are listening this podcast to follow Barbara Rajko's Instagram page. Barbara, it was lovely having you on this podcast. You have enhanced the whole quality of this podcast by explaining how your background from being a pilot to a painter has been an incredible journey, and how people can use this as an inspiration and use this as a guidance to begin their journey, to do something special and impactful in their uh, career.
oh, thank you, Siddhan. And Dipash, you both asked me questions no one has ever asked before. I love that. I
Thank you
do
so much.
do a lot of interviews, and it's kind of like, oh, don't ask me this question again, But you had some really good ones, so thank you. I thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Barbara, on
Thank you so
being on this
much.
podcast. And Deepesh, you want to say something again? Yeah.
No, no, I'm actually, this podcast has broken some myths for me because of, I talked about the art architect, basically the way we perceive an artist, and the way Barbara has come, the way I now know her, in a sense that this is very, very happy person, joyous person, truly expressing herself. And we heard this thing that everyone is natural at something, and she is really natural at what she does, and the way she's honed the skills. I think that whoever is going to listen to this podcast are going to be inspired. They're even going to get direction in their journey of life as an artist. At least that's what I get out of it. So thank you, Barbara.
Oh, thank you. Very nice.
Thank you
Thank you
so much,
very much.
Barbara.
Thank you for listening to Compounding Square, where myself, Deepesh, and my friend Siddhant share ideas and stories which make us 1% better every day. If you like our work, subscribe to our channel, rate, review, and share our podcast wherever you are listening.